Today is day 5, and we're talking about color. How does color impact our presentations and make our audience respond to our message? Let's give a listen.
Color is the second most important and influential element used in designing for a PowerPoint slide to make sure that the message is received by the audience. Color has a definite psychology to it and a meaning that the audience members grasp. For example, if you're giving a presentation to a bunch of financial people, the one color that you don't want to use is red, because red sends a bad signal. Back to our early art days in elementary school, when we look at the color wheel, hues are another name of referring to true color. Now, when we want to change the color, we can create shades or tints, and that is determined by the amount of white for tints and black for shades that's added to the hue. Notice how tints, shades, and midtones play with a white background. We can see the shades and the midtones fairly well on a white background. Tints all but disappear. Tints would be better suited for a black background. Midtones would also appear well on a black background. Over this and the following 2 slides, notice that the readability of the text is greater when there is a contrast between the text color and the image or background that it's placed on. Notice how we affect the saturation of the image and then add color to the text to create interest and to be able to draw our eyes to that information. See between this and the next slide the differences. One of the first things we need to do is to establish a color palette. There are 4 basic color palettes that I use. This first one is the monochromatic palette. That means I'm using one color, but I'm using a lot of shades and tints of that one color. The next slide shows how I apply this palette. The next palette is called the analogous palette, and what that does is that you're choosing one color and then you're choosing a color on either side of that initial color. You're also including all the different tints and shades that can be used. The next slide shows the analogous palette applied. The complementary palette chooses the colors that are on either side of the color wheel. Also, be using their tints and their shades. The following slide is an example of that application. The achromatic +1 palette is my personal favorite. That chooses one color to use and combines it with black, white, and gray. The next slide shows you practical application of this palette. In addition to matching the message, what could you possibly have as a reason to want to know that your colors are going to work in your PowerPoint? Well, in the venue, you've got to know that the text color that you're using and the background colors that you're using are going to provide for optimum visuals for your audience, depending upon the lighting in the room. Make sure that once you've chosen your color palette, that you test every element for readability. How can you make text jump off of an image? Well, in these 4 slides, you're going to see the original color, then we're going to change the color, we're going to add a shadow to it, and then our final, we will add an auto shape behind it. Each one of these will make your text jump off your image. One of the best ways to choose our colors that we're going to use as text on the slide is to actually pick the color from an image on the slide. There we have overall consistency between the colors on the image and the text. How do we do that? We use a color picker. In this case, we use Pixie. The next slide is actually an online color management tool called Color by Adobe. Once you get on there, you can make all sorts of color palettes and be able to access them anytime you need them.
I hope you've enjoyed this quick lesson on color. Join us tomorrow as we talk about typography. and how we can use words as graphic images and not lines of bullet point text. Join us tomorrow.